Hello gamers and welcome back. I'm Rob, of course, or Warshack if you want to call me by my in-game name. And this video we're going to be talking about and going over the top 5 best aggressive decks for beginner players to kind of aim to get into build. Keep in mind that I've built these decks in a way that there's no legendaries and there's very little epics, if not any. I've built them very, cautious in the dust count and how much it takes to build them, because I know as a beginner player, you have very little resources, right? So you kind of want to spend them the best way you can and build kind of the best deck you can build with the dust you have. I'm going to be doing this video in 3 different formats: the aggressive beginner decks, the mid-range beginner decks, and the control beginner decks, which kind of covers, I want to say, the main 3 archetypes of decks you can build in Hearthstone. So we're going to start with the aggressive decks. The Huntard. So the first deck we're going to take a look at, and keep in mind the dust count is going to go up as the decks we talk about. So it'll end with, I believe, Druid is our last one. It'll be the highest amount of dust cost. But the Hunter is going to be our cheapest. The name of this is basically Face Hunter. The goal of the deck is to kill your opponent basically by turn, I want to say 6, maybe even sooner. You have the deck basically caps out at the 4-drop creatures. You can throw Leroy in the deck, but again, that's a legendary, not something every player or new player is going to have. So you just basically want to fill out your curve every turn. Start off with the Argent Squires, the Fiery Bats, follow that up with the Dire Wolf Alpha, Huge Toad, Knife Jugglers. Knife Jugglers combos really well with cards such as Unleash the Hound. There's a ton of beasts in the deck. Beasts work well with the Kill Command, which deals 5 damage instead of 3. The Horse Rider and your Wolf Rider are your charge minions that get in there, and again, just deal as much damage as fast as possible. This deck makes very minimal trades unless you have to, right? So let's say your Fiery Bat is out on the board. It's a 1-drop, 2/1. And then let's say they drop like an Azure Drake has taken 2 damage by something, right? So you're trading basically a 1-drop, 2/1 Fiery Bat into a 5-drop, 4/2 Azure Drake. Obviously, you probably want to make that trade. But most of the time, this deck, you're just going to be going face, using your hero power as much as possible, which is deal 2 damage, and just go face. Hence Face Hunter. Every card in the deck's basically meant to kill. And keep in mind the Acidic Swamp Ooze, right? It doesn't actually kill anything, but it stops your opponent from killing your stuff. Right now, Shaman, Warrior are the most popular, I would say. Some of the Shaman for sure is the most popular class on ladder, but followed by probably Warrior pretty close to it. And all of them run weapons, and weapons are very destructive to your face tendencies because they kill your creatures, which means you can't attack them directly. So the Acidic Swamp Ooze in there is basically to stop all of the people who can afford better decks that play, Control Warrior, and I wouldn't say mid-range Shaman's an expensive deck, but it's a deck that runs a weapon which you don't want any part of. It will destroy your creatures ever so painfully. So that basically sums up the Face Hunter. The next one's going to be the Pirate Warrior. I would say this definitely runs very similar to Hunter, but instead of using... Okay, so the Hunter focuses on cheap creatures, charge minions, a weapon here or there. This deck is focusing on, again, charge minions, but instead of using spells like Kill Command and Quick Shot of that nature, this uses your weapons, right? So you have the Fiery War Axe, you have the Arcane Reaper, which is going to be... You'll find to be most of your damage in a lot of this game, or finisher damage. So you're using your weapons, you're using cards such as Upgrade, which increases the durability of a weapon along with the attack, along with the Bloodsail Cultist, which is basically, again, a 3/4 creature with an upgrade attached to it, because if you have a pirate on the board, it increases your weapon by 1/1, which increases, of course, the attack and durability. You've got cards like Heroic Strike, which you don't even have to have a weapon. It's basically a 2 mana, deal 4 damage, which is insane value, and it's huge burst. But again, this deck is going to run I wouldn't say very similar to the Face Hunter, because there are a little bit of differences with the pirate synergies and the weapons, but the goal is the same, right? Just dealing as much damage as fast as possible, and making trades when you have to. You can also use your weapon to clear creatures, and then just have your creatures go face instead of trading creatures and then just weapon go face. So yeah, very kind of, I think I would prefer to play, in my opinion, the Pirate Warrior over the Face Hunter, just because I enjoy the Warrior class a little bit more, and I think this deck might be a little bit more flexible for you guys, and you might see a little bit more interactiveness. Maybe? I don't know. It's all opinion, guys. I'm sure I'm going to get people that are like, oh, Face Hunter is so much harder than Pirate Warrior. Pirate Warrior is so much harder than Face Hunter. Anyway, they basically run the same, and they just have kind of 2 slightly different ways of killing your opponent, whether it be through weapons or spells. Moving to the next one, the infamous Zoo Warlock. So this deck, it's not so much face oriented as field oriented. You're building up a very resilient, strong board full of small minions. It's not really bursty. Again, the power overwhelming is bursty, but in comparison to, like double heroic strike like warriors can do, or like kill command hero power like the hunters can do, this can do the double power overwhelming, but the deck just has a lot of very resilient creatures such as the possessed villager, the 1-drop void walker, the Argent Horse Riders, the Darkshell Councilmans, the Harvest Golems. The Defender of Argus allows you to buff your smaller minions, making them, of course, deal more damage, but being more resilient with +1 HP. And then, of course, the Doom Guard is kind of like your burst. I don't even call him burst. He's only 5 damage, but it's a sizable amount of damage. He's a 5/7 with charge, but you have to discard 2 cards. But so just keep in mind that. The hero power of the Warlock allows you to keep the gas going. And what I mean by that is because the minions are so cheap, you're going to be able to play them every turn. You're going to be able to play a large quantity of creatures, more so than most any other deck, right? And then because of that, there's not going to be a lot of cards in your hand, so you can keep playing the creatures. You'll eventually run out. But the Warlock hero power says, don't you worry about that, my little friend. All you have to do is sacrifice 2 HP and you get to draw a new card, which is insane for this particular deck, because it just allows you to basically draw 2 for every time your opponent draws 1, as long as you have the 2 free mana, which, because your creatures cost so little, sacrificing 2 mana to draw a card, most of the time you can play it almost as soon as you tap, if you have the mana to do it. Again, this is going to be running the Acidic Swamp Ooze. For a common card, you can't really beat it, because right now, almost every game you're going to play, I wouldn't say every game you're going to play, but at least half, if not more games you're going to play, you're going to be going against another class that's going to play a weapon sometime in that game, and you're going to be able to get a lot of the Acidic Swamp Ooze value. And it's just one of those cards that a lot of people just don't play around it, and especially they're not going to play around it if you're at the lower ranks, maybe playing Zoo or Face Hunter, like decks they wouldn't expect it, so they drop it, they think they're safe. You whip out the Acidic Swamp Ooze, and it shows them what's up. Again, very board control centered. You can't really do, again, a whole lot of damage just straight from the hand, unless you have like Doom Guard and then Power Overwhelming. But keep in mind, when you play Doom Guard, you have the chance to discard Power Overwhelming. And I also know, for you veteran Hearthstone players that are watching this, for some reason you don't need these decks, that we're missing out on like the silverware golems and things of that nature. I tried to build, again, these decks how do I say this? As cheap as possible. And Silverware Golem comes from Karazhan, and Karazhan is an expansion, and the expansion, or I should say an adventure mode, and the adventure mode costs money. And so I tried to build these decks in a way where it's not expensive for people to make them. Because I know I'm going to get comments, why didn't you include this? Why didn't you include that? Well, I didn't include them because they cost stuff. And as a new player, you don't have you don't want to spend any money. You want to see if you like the game, and these are kind of the best decks to kind of test that out. Also, the Hellfire is an interesting choice. The 4-drop Hellfire, which deals 3 damage to everything, including your minions, which seems to be very anti-synergy like, because all of your stuff in the deck mostly has 3 HP or lower, and you're like, Rob, you're killing your own minions, what the hell are you doing? You have no idea what you're doing. I found that how do I say this? Playing cards like Hellfire is so against what Zoo normally does that they just don't play around it. They don't expect it. They have no idea. So let's say you're going against another Zoo or another aggressive base deck, right? You have a really bad start. You're unable to get the field. You're just losing. Your creatures are dying. It's a horrible day, and they think, okay, they're gonna swarm the board because there's no way that this Zoo or this other aggressive deck is running a card that could possibly kill their own minions. Well, when you're behind, Hellfire is a game changer. And when I was first starting Hearthstone, and even now, I sometimes throw it in my aggressive decks, and it comes in handy so many times that I can't even tell you. So you can take this out and put another Dark Iron Dwarf, not a big deal, but I found that having one Hellfire, you have a slow game and you're playing another aggressive deck, and it'll bring you back. Simple as that. Moving to the next one's going to be the Face Shaman. This is probably the strongest deck out of all of these. I wouldn't say the most fun. It also has Doomhammer, which is an epic, guys. So keep in mind that there's an epic in this, and it's going to be more expensive. You can see the 1700 or closer to the 1800 dust count. I would have to say is very, very, I would say more similar to the Face Hunter. It has spells for large burst power like the Lightning Bolt and the Lava Burst, very similar to the Kill Command and Quick Shots. I don't even know if there's Quick Shots in the last one, but it doesn't matter. Very similar to the Kill Command. It has, again, the Argent Squires, the Abusive Sergeants, the Stormforge Axe. This is in here because you can't have... It's a beginner deck. You can't afford 2 Doom Hammers. You can't afford Spirit Claws. So what do we got? We got the Stormforge Axe. It's got to do what it's got to do. The Rockbiter weapon, again, combos well with either your face, making trades with other creatures, putting it on a totem. The Flame Tongue Totem, not too much to say there, just a good solid card. The Totem Golem's amazing. The Tunnel Trog isn't in here because I'm pretty sure that's League of Explorers. Well, I know it's League of Explorers and it's expensive. No expensiveness. This is cheap, cheap, cheap. Is there anything that stands out? There's nothing really that stands out on this deck that you wouldn't normally see in Aggressive Shaman. All of these cards can be found in very competitive Aggressive Shaman list, besides maybe the Dark Iron Dwarf, but I find the card just to be great due to the fact that you most of the time have totems on the field, and the totems you can make trades with other creatures, and you don't actually lose anything. On top of that, if you feel like, you can go ahead and put in there's a Bloodlust. If you feel as if, like, you know, a Dark Iron Dwarf, or maybe the Acidic Swamp Ooze isn't what you're looking for, you can put in a Bloodlust. But I found more times than not the card sits in your hand because it's only good while you're ahead. It's not really good when you're behind. So just keep that in mind. The solid deck, though, I'd probably say the higher of the decks out of all of these, just because Shaman is a very, very powerful class right now. All right, so our last is going to be the Token Druid. This is coming in at close to 2,000 dust. Keep in mind that these are the aggressive decks. I know I'm going to get comments of why you didn't put Thunderbluff Valiant in your in the aggressive Shaman deck, and that's because that's a mid-range card. That is not an aggressive card. So just keep in mind these are, again, budget decks for new players. We can't include everything, guys. And these are my opinion. You can build the deck however you like. These are just my builds that I would recommend if there's a friend and they were like, hey, you know, I'm brand new. What do you got for me? This is what I got for you. So the Token Druid, it uses cards such as Wisp of the Old Gods, which again is an epic, along with the Dark Whispers, which I think is a rare or an epic. So this, again, for having 2 epics in the deck, it's going to be more expensive than the rest, but you know, a 2,000 dust Token Druid was kind of hard to build, but if I were to build it, this is what it would look like. It also uses cards like Violet Teacher, which is basically how this deck gets its burst, right? You're going to be able to play Violet Teacher. You combo that with cards such as Power of the Wild, your Living Roots, your Rats. It's going to create a bunch of 1/1s on the board. The tokens are basically very small minions that get produced by other spells, or a byproduct of other spells or creatures. From there, once you have a board full of at least 3, 4, maybe 5 very small creatures, you go ahead and you play Soul of the Forest, which says give your minions Death Rattle, and then when they die, they summon a 2/2 Treant, which is basically so you have a small minion, you swarm the board, you make it resilient with giving them Death Rattle, and then when they decide they can finally kill your board, there's a new board that springs up because they have Death Rattle. And then while you have a big board, you have cards like Savage Roar, which is a 3 mana, give all of your creatures and your hero +2 attack. So let's say you only have 3 cards on the board. You give them all +2 attack plus your hero. That's 10 damage. So you have a 3 mana, deal 10 damage if you have 4 cards on the board, of course, plus your hero. So it's just a lot of burst damage in this deck if you can get your smaller minions to stick. And again, Living Roots summon smaller creatures. Argent Squire has Divine Shield. The Power of the Wild gives all of your creatures +1/+1, or turns into a raptor. Your Wrath is just, you know, small removal or draw. Your Darnassus Ass Pirate is your kind of oomph. It allows you to gain a mana crystal if they don't kill it, and when it dies you lose one, but it's basically kind of just to burst you over and to get you more mana more quickly, more mana more quickly. Druid of the Saber can turn into a stealth card or charge, which will help with a Savage Roar combo. Horse Rider, Divine Shield, Harvest Golem, Death Rattle. You can see all of these minions serve a purpose, whether they have Divine Shield, Death Rattle, or they summon other creatures, or they have charge. There's a purpose to the minion, and in combination with all of the other minions, it'll work out well. Mire Keeper can summon even another 2/2 slime, or you can use it for ramp. Most of the time you're going to be summoning the 2/2 slime in this particular deck, because again, the more minions on the board you have, the stronger your Savage Roar is. The stronger your Savage Roar is, the more damage you can do. The more damage you can do, the faster you can kill them. All right, so with that, we've gone over the top 5 aggressive decks that I would recommend to a beginner player. Keep in mind that you can change cards out as you see fit. This isn't just like, oh, that's the token Druid deck I need to build. No other token Druid deck is going to work. This is, again, for very budget players, so if you plan to drop 50, 100 bucks, even more than that on this game, you can kind of bypass these decks and build maybe even stronger decks, or use this as like a template for you, or a baseline of like what you're looking to do with the deck. So with that said, if you've enjoyed this and you would like a mid-range version and a control version of it, I'll go ahead and start making those and putting the decks together. But I kind of want to wait to see how you guys like this new format, with me toning in on kind of like a specific deck archetype, control, mid-range, this one being aggro, and from there I'll build you guys decks and explain them and do my best. So as always, hopefully you've enjoyed and learned something. I'm Warshack, of course, and happy whatever the hell day it is. Oh, my voice cracked. Ooh.